भारत के बजट के तरफ न सिर्फ भारत का लेकिन पूरे विश्व का ध्यान है। सबसे पहले देशवासी। ये बजट सत्र में भी तकरार भी रहेगी लेकिन तकरीर भी तो होनी चाहिए।
हमें 2047 तक ऐसे राष्ट्र का निर्माण करना है जो अतीत के गौरव से जुड़ा हो और जिसमें आधुनिकता का हर स्वर्णिम अध्याय हो। हमें ऐसा भारत बनाना है जो आत्मनिर्भर हो और जो अपने मानवीय दायित्वों का पूरा करने के लिए भी समर्थ हो।
Why is the economic growth going to perform better this decade, remainder of the decade? And what the reforms of the last 8 years have done to make sure that happens? As we look ahead to 2047, what else and what more we could do to realize India's full potential in the Amrit Kaal?
Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition, a very, very special edition, the budget edition of Budget 2023 edition here on the right stand, ladies and gentlemen. We'll focus purely on what the expectations are and, of course, the big question that arises. What will the Modi 2.0 Sarkar in its last full budget do? Will it choose Bharat or will it choose the ballot? Well, the head says choose Bharat. But somewhere the heart, are there compulsions politically, with 9 states going to polls, that they will choose populism? And how much will that affect Bharat's growth story? Now, if you were to go with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's principles over the last 8 years, then this is what they will choose. Building a strong, robust Bharat all around, just like you see here on the sets of CNN News 18. Some amazing work done by our technical team, our graphics teams, to try and get you the story of the last 8 years, ladies and gentlemen. And what stands out? What stands out is that Bharat is the only shining beacon at this point in time across the world which is facing recessionary trends. And why is it so? Boond boond sagar banta hai kehte hain, and it takes a seed, and that journey from a seed to a tree is a long one, and it's one of patience and perseverance. Has that been the journey over the last 8 years? We'll try and dwell upon that. And how critical is the next year electorally building up to Lok Sabha 2024? How many factors, internal and external, will influence this budget, which the Prime Minister himself admits is not just being watched by 1.4 billion people in India, but across the world? Let's try and look at what are the key factors and the big signposts. There's been a 6.9% growth projected by the World Bank. December retail inflation has eased to 5.7%. December GST collections are up by 15%. Unemployment rate, though, is at 7.3% in Jan 2023. But there are some very, very good indicators also that there is a 6.9% growth that's been projected by the World Bank. Exports seeing a year-on-year growth of 17.7%. And as we pan out, there are some demands also by the people. What are the demands? Hike spending in health sector from 2% of the GDP. The other demand is hike the tax exemption limit to 5 lakhs. Give something for the middle class at least. After the first year or the second year, you've hardly done anything, is what the middle class is saying. Humne kya bura kiya hai? But in terms of fiscal prudence, will the government also work towards encouraging people to migrate from the old tax regime to the new tax regime? That's been a challenge. The other aspect is the crypto, where you have tried to kill this entire crypto parallel economy developing and people being robbed of their money, or money that should actually be doing the rounds in the market and circulating being parked there. But this 30% tax, and that too with retrospective effect, there is a huge lobby which is saying do it. But will the RBI allow it? Will the government, which has taken a very, very strong position against crypto, will it do it? Will it blink? Or will it say, sorry, this stays? But can we expect some relief for the corporates? We'll have to see. We'll have to wait and watch. But what are the challenges for the government, politically and otherwise? The most important aspect, as we show you the growth in all the sectors, and it's all reflecting all over the place, is the fact that there are polls in 9 states coming up ahead of Lok Sabha 2024. It's the last full-fledged budget of this government. The next one will be an interim budget with a vote on account. The budget, will it be populist even as you have the challenge of steering growth while creating jobs that have been lost during the time of the pandemic? So there are many challenges, ladies and gentlemen, from industry to infrastructure to defense to agriculture, and of course to try to ensure that there is a manufacturing, healthy manufacturing. Rather than creating jobs, are we going to create opportunity for employment, social entrepreneurship? How big is that story become? You have to be with us here at CNN News 18 to get the Aam Aadmi's perspective through the coverage of Budget 2023. Let's try and understand what are the 5 big expectations. There are many expectations, but we've tried to saddle various sectors and see the key demands from each sector and what stands out. Aapki sabse badi maang kya ho? So let's start from the Aam Aadmi, then walk into the corporates and of course the agriculture sector. So what are the budget expectations? Hike in income tax exemption limit to ₹5 lakh. A lot of people are asking for this, along with some incentive to encourage people to move from the old tax regime to the new tax regime. So how will that happen? We have seen uniform tax of 15% for all corporate sectors. Can this be done? Will they do it? And what will it mean? Job creation to balance COVID-induced losses, despite we had the chief economic advisor saying that we are no longer a COVID-ridden or a COVID-impacted economy. We've moved out of it. We've emerged out of the impact of COVID. But will this reflect? Hike health sector budget from 2% of the GDP. That's from the health sector because there's a huge focus on health infra and of course developing the health sector, which has been of course the underbelly exposed during the pandemic. Increase the PM Kisan Samman Nidhi allocation. Why? Because that factor, when you gave food security to nearly 80 crore people, the heart, Chota Kisan, and of course the core now perhaps of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's victory march into 2024 Lok Sabha elections is that person. The person who's not there in the tax bracket, the person who's not there always in the consideration set, but the person whose dreams this government has said it's committed to fulfill because of the vision or the module or the philosophy of Antyodaya. Let's go across to our guests, ladies and gentlemen, and ask them what their expectations are of Budget 2023, the year of India's rise. Sanju Verma, national spokesperson of the BJP and also author of Modinomics, is with us. Sanjay Kumar Partner, Deloitte India, is with us. Gurcharan Dasji, economist, is with us. Rajat Dhar, Director, Indian Investors Federation, is with us. Mr. T.S. Ramakrishnan, Public Policy Analyst, also with us. Namaste, Jai Hind, and thank you very much for joining us. Sanju Verma, one thing you want to see as part of the budget. Had you been the finance minister, what is the one thing you would have said, kuch bhi ho na ho, is bahi khate mein ye hona chahiye?
Anand, that's a very tricky question. You've started by sort of, hitting it out of the park by putting me on the mat. But let me take the bull by its horns. I think, if you notice the Modi government's performance over the last 8.5, 9 odd years, the basic premise of every union budget has been to marry the concept of welfare economics with that of reforms. The budget under the Modi government has neither been too populist nor has it been something that completely ignores the marginalized sections of the society. So as we enter, Budget 2003 tomorrow, I think the corporate tax reductions have already happened. In September 2019, we reduced corporate tax from 30% to 22%, which had a cost of 1.45 lakh crore to the exchequer. But look at the benefits in the next 3 odd years. The entire corporate tax profits last year was about 5.5 lakh crore, which is equal to roughly 2.5% of India's GDP. Now, coming to personal income taxes, I started off with taxation because this has always been the most awaited and dare I say the controversial bit, which leaves some people happy and others dismayed and disappointed for various reasons. On the income tax front, I think the biggest reform, which has been not overhyped, rather it has been underrated, is that in August, September of 2020, if you recall, we came out with this tax charter where we said there will be seamless tax assessment, there will be painless tax assessment, there will be faceless tax assessment.
Correct.
Because very often when I speak to people across income brackets, given that, I myself have worked with mega bulge bracket firms and now I'm in public life, I get to meet all kinds of people. The general message is we don't mind paying the necessary amount of taxes because we do understand government needs to spend on better infrastructure, better roads, better connectivity, digitization. But we do not want tax terrorism. We want tax transparency.
Correct.
We do not want to be taken for a royal ride. So I think on the tax transparency bit, you will see the Modi government going forward and doing more than what you and me expect.
Fantastic.
And, whether this means that there will be a hike in the basic exemption limit, which is currently 2.5 lakh per annum, and for senior citizens, it is 3 lakh per annum. There is a talk on social media that may be hiked to 5 lakh per annum.
Right.
I think may not be 5 lakh per annum, but maybe you can expect something. This is just what I feel. I don't have any insider dope on the budget, so to
Correct.
speak.
So this is the economist in you, which is saying that there will be something in it for the corporates and there will be something in it for the middle class. And it will come out, but not at the cost of the growth estimate, which is pegged between 6% to 6.8%. But Gurcharan Das ji, there are other people who are saying, GST to aapne kar diya, Gabbar Singh hi nikla hai ye, because 92,000 crore se 1.5 lakh crore per month you have averaged you've average collections. But atta, dal, chawal pe why are you putting GST? Really exempt the staples from GST and tighten the collection mechanism. Tighten the evasion mechanism, because there are still a lot of people who are evading GST and they're getting away with it. So if you do that, you will be able to offset it. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I think this is not really the issue. We can do a separate program on that. But really, where I stand on it is that I think that, frankly, everything should be under GST. I mean, that's the way to build the future.
Right.
But that will take me time to explain, and I think the subject is the budget.
Yeah.
And the real issue of the budget is really, one, it's a pre-election budget, but I would hate to see freebies. I would hate to see new schemes announced. That's what we don't want. I mean, that's what everybody thinks will happen, but I just hope, because this government has behaved very responsibly in the past with regard to welfare schemes, etc., I hope that they will stick to the prudence that they have shown. Now, the real issue before this budget is the issue how much to go for growth and how much to hold back on the basis of fiscal prudence. We are in a very difficult world situation. India is fortunate, but 1/3 of the world could be going into recession, huge international headwinds, and so we have to be careful. Now, my own hope would be that we can hold the fiscal deficit at 6.4, but announce a roadmap for bringing it down to 4.5 by 25-26, which is the target. But also push for growth. Now, the room is limited because 75% of the budget is already determined. You know, you have to pay your debts. 30% of your budget goes into debt paying. I mean, it's too high. The 80 to 85% debt is too high, but still, anyway, we have to pay that. The fiscal deficit of states and center combined is 10%. That's too high. So it's a perilous situation. If we can hold 6.4 and spend money on the infrastructure projects that have already started. In other words, go for the National Infrastructure Pipeline, NIP. There's momentum there, and that is going to build India's future. Because we need jobs in the future, not giveaways. I think that's the other thing. This government has been very, very has walked the tightrope during the COVID crisis. People said, give this away, give that away.
Yeah.
And they were very prudent. I would say that the free food program, it's been announced that it will continue. And I guess that before the election, you can't stop it.
Right.
But I hope we'll stop it because it's an emergency program. At the end, it was not meant for daily thing. It was a COVID emergency induced. At some point, we have to stop it. So that is the big question in this budget. How much will we go for the India's future? Because we are really this is India's moment.
Yes, it is.
We are for 30 years, we've had almost 7% growth rate, 6.7, 6.9, somewhere in between.
Right.
This is amazing for a democracy. But
Correct.
we haven't created the jobs. So we have to move to become a manufacturing nation.
Yes.
It's ridiculous. 15, 16% of GDP manufacturing. We have not created an industrial revolution. I hope that there are now, we can talk about this, but there are good grounds, at least 10 reasons, I believe, that we will maintain that 7% growth. And if we do that, then by 2047, we will be a middle-class economy with $10,000 per capita income, $19 trillion of GDP.
Wow. Fantastic.
Much more respectable. That's what we've got to aim for. Every budget should be moving to that objective.
If currently, if we look at the leadership like Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the focus is on building Bharat and not populism. So there are some hard calls that he has even put his core voter base through the rigor. So if you could put his core voter base through the rigor with demonetization and GST within 2 years of winning a fantastic mandate, that itself shows that this is not being done for electoral popularity. It is being done with a mission to say that till the time we have the mandate, we'll do something for the country. Whether they've got everything right, the jury is out there. Nobody can get everything right. They will make mistakes, but is the intent there to push the nation in a particular direction? That's the larger aspect. You talked about infrastructure. April 2014, we had 91,287 kilometers of roads. It's now the national highway network has grown to around 1,41,000 kilometers by 2021. So 550 districts are scheduled to be connected under the Bharatmala project. The national highway network has grown over 55% in the last 8 years. So more roads have been built in the last 8 years than what was done till 2014. So some amazing numbers there as far as a push for infrastructure. But Sanjay Kumarji, you can look at manufacturing, you can try and say that you will be the China +1, or if nations looking for anywhere but China, we want to be the option. There are analysts who have watched India and said that if you get into manufacturing and you're strengthening the manufacturing aspect, you will automatically become a developed economy. So everybody will be okay. But we are surrounded by conflict. If Russia-Ukraine is happening, China-Taiwan is brewing, and you now have Iran and Israel. In a situation like this, how much will external factors also impact? And will this budget have to consider that?
So, yes, there will be some external factors. There will be, and that's the reason why you have such a wide growth number that Economic Survey has put between from 6.0 to 6.8%. So there will be questions on that. However, the way the government has moved on in the last few years, particularly after COVID-19, after the pandemic, the expenditure on the capital expenditure on the infrastructure, year after year, 25% or above allocation, that is certainly quite heartening, including the digital infrastructure. So I think the government would try and continue on that, because it's not a one-day story. It has to be continued over a period of time. And the way the taxes have jumped, and direct taxes is going to go above the budget figure by at least 1 lakh crores, which is almost like 7% over the budget estimates. So government is in a good position and might as well continue on the same story.
Right.
I was also thinking what else the government could do. And one thing which looks to me a very important area is education. Education is, government did that national education policy.
Yes.
Brought brought the policy forward. Now is the time to support it with a allocation of funds, create the necessary capital infrastructure, create the necessary ecosystem. I would also want to talk in the same vein for health, because health, the government expenditure is about 42 and the private expenditure is about 46% of the health expenditure of the nation. And that is where I think the government would want to do that. You know, the last one, which I would want to say, because it's also important to mention here, is the MSME. MSME in the budget, economic survey brings out that 30% growth has been in the credit to MSME. MSME is the backbone of manufacturing.
Yeah.
If the MSME grows, the manufacturing will definitely start growing. So it's the time to bring certain push. I'm sure the government would have recognized that aspect and would try and bring something special for the MSME sector, because if you see the overall thrust that the government is trying to do is largely the supply side easing. And MSME is definitely suffering from the supply side constraints, and it will be important to bring that. And education, I'm also thinking when I talk about education, I am also thinking in terms of skilling, because skilling and reskilling is also very, very important for manufacturing. So I think the journey has started. How in this election year the government picks up some of these issues and continues in the subsequent years is something which will have to be watched for.
Well,
I think the path is quite clear.
Well, path is clear. Are they willing to walk down that path? Are they willing to embrace a philosophy where they create an environment that people are okay to take risks, and they will pick entrepreneurship over getting a secure job? This sarkari job mentality, will they create an environment that people will be ready to shed? So it's not about how many jobs you create, it's about how many entrepreneurs you create, how many avenues to go ahead and build, manufacture, create. That's what you would do. If you have the ability to train and skill, are they going to create an environment where they will encourage you to start a training center so that you can skill more people? Rajat Dhar.
Yes, sir.
Your thoughts?
My thoughts are, as a director for Indian Investors Federation, I will highlight a couple of pointers which are from the perspective of Indian investors. So when I am talking about investors, they will be a normal retail investors to as high as the HNI investors. Now, when we are talking about tax rationalization, they has to happen in 2 or 3 different ways. First and foremost, there are AIFs. So AIF category 1, 2 and 3. So tax pass-through status is available in category 1 and 2, but not in category 3. Jinko nahi pata hai, category 3 AIFs are those AIFs which invest in venture capital, venture financing, your fund management, fundraising, which in turn goes into real estate, infrastructure and other e-commerce platforms and other things. That means that in turn affect job creation and that in turn affects the job creation and everything else. That is one aspect. Taxation ki main baat karoon, we are expecting that government should come with tax rationalization where there is a difference in tax for fixed income schemes. Say for example, debt NCDs, non-convertible debentures or corporate deposits are taxed in a certain way. Then there are bonds, Government of India bonds. If you take directly secondary bonds on a trading platform, you will be taxed as per your tax slab. But if you take the same thing through mutual fund route under SDL, state development loans, you will be having an indexation benefit. So we, as an investor, we fear that government might again now block those holes. So that might be the dent. Because last time we have seen that there has been a capital gains tax on equity investments. So difference has been taxed. However, the increase in the exemption limit as was expected last year had not happened. In my last media presence at Awaaz, I had already told that CNBC Awaaz that we should expect at least exemption limit to be raised as high as 8 lakhs, including all the deductions for the retail consumers, to say that. because inflation itself is on the higher end.
Correct.
And the saving avenues like EPF and PPF, EPF above 2.5 lakhs is taxable EPF now. So at the end of the day, when we're talking about the tax rationalization, we should also see that there are preferential corporate tax of 15%. In some segments, there are 15% preferential corporate tax rate. Now, these should be extended to those sectors and companies which are working in PLI announced schemes. So there are certain sectors, the companies and sectors are working in those which are under PLI scheme by Government of India. They are not able to be in the 15% tax bracket to say for the
So incentivize those who are embracing government schemes. Try and give them a tax leeway from 22%, bring it down to 15%, encourage more people to get into public, private and PLI. So because PLI is also supposed to, is aimed at encouraging manufacturing and to try and, please complete.
Unless and until we are not able to scale it up, we can't be a manufacturing hub. That is point number one. Now the point number two here, the important point that we can see in next 3 years is if automobile industry in next 5 years or next 10 years looking is like we have an audacious goal as Indians ki we will have at least all public transport electric vehicle. Now what happened to 10 lakh people who are actually in the automotive industry or ancillary industries जिसमें आधे से ज़्यादा component will be of no use. So then there will be job creation issues and unemploymental issues coming up in next 2 to 3 years.
उसमें एक ये है कि electric vehicles से ज़्यादा it is flex fuel and alternative fuel. So there is a big push for hydrogen, and if hydrogen happens, then that number that you talked about, automobile industry, people becoming useless, parts not happening, that number will also greatly reduce. So it's not going to totally disrupt the automobile industry.
Disrupted, but yes, reskilling and upskilling has to be done, and so that there are no gaps in it.
Correct.
So that last mile and last personal connectivity has to be there.
The challenge where I see is how is this government going to skill? Be it education, be it health, be it manufacturing. The biggest challenge today across all spectrums is skilled. Is how are you going to skill? Now, if that's going to become the focus, and if you are going to give a skilled workforce across these sectors, automatically things will happen. Because once somebody is skilled, they have confidence. So if they don't want to work for somebody, they'll start something on their own. So it all comes to basic ability of skilling. Gurcharan Jasti, I'll come back to you in just a bit. I'm going to bring in T.S. Ramakrishnan for a comment and then go back to Sanju Verma and Gurcharan Jasti. Quickly sharing some numbers that were thrown up by the Economic Survey, and we can try and put that out. The Economic Survey has said that the US FDI inflow into pharma has risen 4x from $180 million in financial year 2019, financial year 19 or FY19 to $699 million in FY 2022. So it's there on your screen. I'm just reading it off the laptop. Now, what it then says is second largest mobile phone manufacturer. That's what we've become. 6 crore units in financial year 15. In financial year 21, we were manufacturing 29 crore units. The other aspect, that US electronics export rising nearly 3x. That's the third number, from $4.4 billion in FY19 to $11.6 billion in FY 2022. Now, T.S. Ramakrishnan, all these numbers are phenomenal. But is this going to get you votes? Somewhere a politician in the government will also be thinking कि vote मिलेगा, वो कौन सा clause है, वो कौन सा announcement है जिससे कि vote मिलेगा. Because the opposition will go back and say, अरे कुछ भी नहीं दिया budget में.
No, from the experience of the last 8 years, the government has been treading on a very balanced path with reference to fiscal discipline. So even when immediately after the COVID, when all the opposition parties and liberals asked for put the money in the hands of the people, the government said that that is not the way to do that, and that is actually a good decision because our inflation has been much lower compared to the international inflation, because even in countries like US where the money has been dispersed just like that people have resulted in huge inflation. And with reference to pharma industry that you mentioned, the COVID has given a good push for us because we have created, at least one is completely indigenous, one is with Oxford Institute. So we have created two indigenous, one is fully indigenous, another is partly indigenous vaccines, and that has given a very good push for our pharma industry, and we need to sustain it for other products also. And regarding, the question of corporate tax for whether to retain the same corporate tax or to decrease or increase, because both are being said. Some people say that the corporate tax has to be increased because that will reduce the rich-poor divide. But the corporate tax reduction to 15% has been given only for some of the manufacturing sector, not for the service sector, and that must continue, and that must be extended to the sectors.
So you're saying
Rajat
Dhar also said the same thing, that those who are part of the PLI scheme, their corporate tax should be reduced to 15%. But you're saying extend it to the service sector too. उन्होंने क्या गलत किया? They are all creating jobs, and if they are creating wealth, you got to encourage those who are creating wealth, because the responsibility to create jobs should not be, and that's what many economists say. Gurcharan Das ji, correct me if I'm wrong. Should not be the responsibility of the government. It's the private sector that has got to create jobs. Governance is the government's job. Creating jobs is not their job. Gurcharan ji?
I have a different, I have a point to make actually. So it is, see, now Indian economy is extremely lopsided. In the sense, almost 55 to 60% of our GDP comes from a service sector. I'm not saying that we should disturb the service sector, but we should encourage, because policy instruments are to be used to encourage the sectors which are lacking. So which are lagging and lacking. So manufacturing sector constitutes only 16%. Even if you add mining and construction, it will come to only 25%.
So you're saying encourage GDP. Manufacturing sector, incentivize them.
Encourage, because this is incentivize, because policy instruments are essentially meant for that.
Right.
Policy instruments are essentially meant for.
Let me take that to Gurcharan Das ji. Let me take that to Gurcharan. Yes, Gurcharan ji.
Please.
I'll come back to you, Ramakrishnan ji. I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Yes, Gurcharan ji.
Okay. So I don't agree. I think that the private sector taxes are fine. I would say corporate tax rate, and it's good. The incentive is for essentially manufacturing, that 15% for greenfield manufacturing, because we have failed to create a manufacturing or an industrial revolution. And the PLI scheme, all these things are towards that. I think the reality is that the old model, which created industrial revolutions all over the Far East, is the right model still for India, which is the export of labor-intensive manufacturers. We've missed that bus,
right?
But there is still time. With the disillusionment with China, multinationals are looking for an alternative, that China plus one route.
Yes.
And there are good reasons to believe that we can do it. But let me just quickly answer a few things that have been said. I think that tax buoyancy in India has been good. This is one of the success stories. And if this tax buoyancy continues the next year, then the finance minister really has the room to go for growth. And that's where all these things like creating an industry, growing for growth, meaning infrastructure spending, etc., to create that manufacturing boom. So another point I wanted to make was that somebody talked about tax rates on asset classes. Yes. Today we have a different tax rate for equities, for bonds, for real estate. It should be the same tax for all capital gains. Same tax, because otherwise these create distortions in the economy.
Correct.
This kind of, when you try to incentivize specific instruments. So you should have that 10% long-term capital gains for everybody.
Fair point.
The point, though, coming back to the Industrial Revolution, the good story of the last few years has been the growth in exports. Now, if we can keep that up, because we have not been a success, India still with this growth rate, a recent growth rate in exports, still a very small 2% of world exports. And if we could just take that 2% to 3%, I mean, that opportunity, the world exports are like $25 trillion. So that's an opportunity that we have to grab. And the PLI scheme should be specifically like the electronics scheme. It has an incentive for exports. And therefore, I would test every PLI scheme for that. I would put a sunset clause in every PLI contract on tariff rates. Our tariff rates are too high. So if we want to become a success in the future, and there are very good reasons to believe now, somebody said the roads, that we have doubled the mileage of roads since 2011. That's a great story. We've had a digital revolution. Another great story. The IBC has cleaned up a lot of the NPA mess that we were facing. And so the energy transition that's coming. Imagine.
Yes.
50% of our foreign exchange every year that we earn, it gets lost.
I think a lot of our forex reserves have been shored up because of moving towards clean energy and also reducing our dependence on fossils and imports. That we have to work harder on that. Rajat Dhar had a point, but going back to Sanju Verma. Yes, Sanju Verma, asset classes, capital gains, flat ceiling, do it for everyone. And also Rajat Dhar believes not 5 lakh, 8 lakhs, including deductions.
That has to happen because...
Anand, let me just come in here. I think Gurcharan Das made some very interesting points. But I would add my bits here. I think to have a flat 10% tax rate across asset classes does not work for the simple reason that when you make an equity investment, even in a mutual fund, I'm not talking of direct stocks. Suppose Anand Narasimhan or Sanju Verma decide tomorrow, I will not talk about Adani stocks. Say you decide to buy SBI, or you decide to buy an equity mutual fund with 60% or 70% exposure to equity, and somebody else, your counterpart, decides to buy a debt fund which has zero exposure to equity. Now, debt funds return on an average between 7 to 9%, give or take a little bit. Whereas in equity funds, if you invested 3 years back in an index-linked fund, even after a stock market crash, you've made over 35 to 40% returns. So one person making 35 to 40% returns in a period of 3 years, the other gentleman investing in a debt fund, not willing to take risk. You're saying dono ko ek barabar.
Yeah, because my understanding is very limited compared to the entire August panel. But I have one... By simple submission there, Sanjuji, I disagree with you because the individual is choosing to take... if the person is risk averse, is not getting into a high risk person. The other person is ready to take risks and getting there. Net, what you make is not my problem. What you pay to the government has got to be the entire... So you pay flat 10%. You want to take high risk, take risk. You get 40% return, you pay 10% of whatever you make. You don't want to take risk, you're risk averse, you get 9%, but if you get that 9%, you pay 10% of that 9%. So you have to pay. That's what my from a government point of view is. So I'm just saying risk averse or, risk open to risk is an individual choice. The government can't decide कि अरे इसको हम सस्ता देते क्योंकि वो risk नहीं ले रहा है. I'm going to encourage everybody to take risk, right? Yeah.
Anand, let me come in here. I think, with due respect to you, you understand, about economics a lot more than you are willing to divulge. And Gurcharan Das is a very noted name. He needs no introduction. But let's be very clear. In the US, more than 45 to 50% of the population, population which has the ability to pay taxes, invests in equity markets either directly or through mutual funds.
Correct.
Even in China, which is supposedly a closed economy,
Correct.
For whatever reasons, the exposure to equities by the Chinese is how much, 13%. But how much is it in India? it is less than 3%.
Correct.
So you can't treat equity and debt asset classes in a similar fashion. If you want the equity cult to grow in India, that is not how it works. We have to have a differential tax treatment.
That is Sanjuji, I have limited time. I can only come back and say that.
Important point,
Okay, 30 seconds, please.
30 seconds, because I don't want this debate to be lost between equity and debt asset classes. I just want to say one very important thing, which will be my closing statement. Pre-COVID, our fiscal deficit in FY20 was 4.7% despite two black swan events.
Correct.
Ukraine-Russia war and COVID. We will be having a fiscal deficit in the region of 6.4% in this financial year. Inflation pre-COVID was 4.8%. We are likely to end the year with 6.8%, which I think is brilliant, because even economies which used to struggle with wanting to have a 2% inflation like US, today see inflation at 7% or more. And most importantly, manufacturing sector which degrew, which contracted by 1.4% in pre-COVID era, has shown a growth of 4.1%, and services, which I think is a strong point. Pre-COVID, it grew at 6.3%, and today it is growing at 9.4%.
The challenge.
These are things that need to be taken into account.
These numbers have also been put out, and they will be taken into account. But my point is, the environment has to be to take risks. If in our country only 3%, like you said, are investing in equity, that means we are risk averse. Now, point is that, and that translates into the fact that you don't have so many entrepreneurs. You need to increase the number of small and medium entrepreneurs who will also create jobs. Those jobs will also reflect in your EPFOs. One entrepreneur can create 10 jobs. 10 entrepreneurs can create 1,000 jobs. So that's the whole idea, that people should be ready to take risks, and you need to incentivize and reward risk taking as an ability. And that comes from a certain amount of belief. That comes from skilling. That comes from ability there. So that's how you got to plan your budget. If you really are looking at it from a long-term perspective of building a very strong Bharat. Yes, Rajat ji.
Yeah. I would like to connect both of them, Gurcharan ji and the ma'am, the BJP spokesperson. Now,
Sanju,
let me put a simple case. We are talking about startups. Now, let me take a company, say, for example, a company like, say, Tata Technologies as an example, because Tata Technologies is a company which is in the unlisted space. And on the unlisted space, the capital gains in the pre-IPO market, OTC market, they are taxed as per debt. Long-term taxation, matlab, that is a private equity investment. But you are making it as a taxable on this part. While the same, say, Tata Motors or say any TCS company is taxed on the equity parlance. So my point is, if a person who is investing, we are not talking about the basic startups. I am talking about at the top end, which are profit-making bigger companies, bigger sharks, and which are making very good profitable ventures. All Tata Nexon vehicles are running with the back-end IT infrastructure, Tata Technologies. But as an investor, if we are investing in Tata Technologies and I am selling it in 2 years or 1 year or 6 months, in the OTC market, I will be charged a higher tax bracket if the same period I am having the equity investments. That is point number one. So I agree with Gurcharan ji. In this case, the taxes should be same.
Right.
Point number two, when we talk about comparing India with US or UK and those, for the last 10 years, the inflation rate itself in UK was 1% or 2%.
Correct.
Or US was 1-2%. पिछले 1-2 साल में inflation rate बढ़ा है. And moreover, the गरीबी जितनी हमारे यहाँ पे है और बाहर है, there is a totally difference.
सर, मैं बहुत सिंपल सी बात, बहुत humbly, विनम्रता से कहूँगा, let's not compare ourselves to economies of the world, because we are Bharat, our conditions are different, where we are today are different. It's this ratification, this comparison with other countries, which is always landing us into problems. We need to look inward and see what we need to do as a country to get where we want to, and that's how we need to plan our taxes. That's where we need to be Atmanirbhar even in designing and thinking about our budget also. So that's also important.
10 seconds.
We missed a crucial point here. I'll just take 10 seconds. Gurcharan ji told very good that we have to be labor intensive. But we are at such point of inflection where, while being labor intensive, we have to push two sectors, agriculture and manufacturing and infrastructure. These three sectors at the back of artificial intelligence and the deep technology.
Yes.
For that, we also have need, because if we are trying to scale up and increase our exports also from manufacturing or getting new investments in India in infrastructure space, while we have the labor force, we also need to have a leverage of artificial intelligence, AI and machine
Correct.
learning.
So,
Chat GPT replacing every
I
skill
totally
nowadays.
I agree, and that's where once again skilling comes into play, because we don't have as many coders as we need. We don't have so many people being trained into that area, which is going to be the future of technology and the entire services industry too. T.S. Ramakrishnan, quickly, please make your point in 30 seconds, and the final 10 seconds I'll give to Sanju Verma. Sanjay ji, I'll see if I have time. I've actually overshot, but quickly.
First. So our products are not export competitive, mainly because our input costs are reasonably higher, even not just the labor, but even our logistic cost and other things. So that needs to be actually the investment on infrastructure, especially the transport infrastructure, must continue, because the government has been investing so much on transport infrastructure for the last 7-8 years. But it is investing is one thing, making it functional and then resulting in outcome is another thing.
Yeah.
So
that aspect
is
also
what I'm
has
saying.
to be.
No, it's basically Gati Shakti is basically uniting all the various transportation sectors and see that the system, the wheel starts rotating.
Well,
so that is
they are trying to get into that in terms of with the new logistics infrastructure and framework. I'm sorry, I'm running out of time, Mr. Ramakrishnan. I'm sure you're going to join us through the day tomorrow, so we'll talk at length on that.
Shall I tell?
Yeah, sir, I just want to give 10 seconds, 30 seconds to Sanjay ji also. I have not gone back to him for another comment. Sanjay ji, one thing that you'd want to see in the budget tomorrow.
There was a...
Please make your point.
One thing that I would want is that the taxable limit should be raised, get the 80C and 80D also enhanced, because that is where there will be a lot more satisfaction to the people. We need the consumption to be boosted, and that is where it should, when the people have money, it will get translated. The second point is also on the capital gain rationalization. Where capital gain is not a big tax collection, but you can't achieve all the progressivity as well as equity through the capital gain. So rationalization is a better word rather than thinking of various examples which was given by the esteemed panel.
Right. Thank you very much. Final 10 seconds, Sanju Verma. Labor reforms, agriculture reforms, both you've not been able to push through as a government. That's the bigger challenge if you want to get to see the results of the budget. So legislation is also a challenge. Ji, please.
Anand, I just want to say one thing. We'll have a lot more discussion tomorrow.
Yes.
But I just want to say one thing that, one area which nobody has spoken of and which I think is a huge milestone is the fact that today we have 108 unicorns, and in the last 8.5 odd years, we have more than 78,000 startups. And the big reason for this is the fact that the Modi government decided a couple of years back that ESOPs will only be taxed at the point of sale and not when they are allocated. Previously, ESOPs had, double taxation. Once when you're allocated ESOPs, you were taxed, and once when you actually had realized income. So I think this is a big reform which people should take
What I would like to see is that this budget creates an environment where we go from 78,000 to 780,000 startups, and to these 780,000 startups creating 70 million plus jobs. That's what we'd want to see. I thank you all. Thank you very much. It's been a very, very engaging conversation. And post-budget 2023, tomorrow we are hoping that a lot of these guests will also join us on looking back at the budget 2023 that promises to be a budget for Bharat and not for the ballot. When we come back, ladies and gentlemen, a quick recap of the Modi government over the last 8 years. What have they done to get us here right at the cusp of our Amrit Kal? Stay with us.